world who really don't understand. Freedom has many difficulties, but we have never had to put a wall up to keep our people in.
Welcome to the Leo Zagami Show with Leo and Christy, your favorite couple, for what is a very, very interesting show today, guys. Masonic Secrets of Pope Leo's Papacy, a message from an American Freemason to Pope Leo the 14th, and much more, because we're going to go back into the do what thou wilt phenomena of Aleister Crowley that originates not only with Rabelais but also with St. Augustine. As you know, this present Pope is an Augustinian. So there is a lot of interesting aspects also of Freemasonry in the Vatican. Wow, what a broadcast today. I will suggest you immediately share it with all your friends. And of course, they're telling us now that they're having trouble in streaming on one of the Facebook platforms. I wonder why. Let me see if we can sort it out. Maybe we can remove it and then replace it. I don't know, guys. This is really weird. That never happens that Facebook suddenly has a problem this way. What do you think, Christy?
I think it's pretty normal.
It's pretty normal.
This happens.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah. I'm like restricted on Instagram again. So.
Again, maybe now we're attempting to see if we can rebroadcast again. It seems that now has it's launched. It's launched. Okay. So we are broadcasting, guys, on my profile, main profile on Facebook, on the Leo Lion Zagami in America page on Facebook, as well as a variety of channels on YouTube, on X, on Rumble. Wow. And it's
all over the place.
We're all over the place. Absolutely. Maybe Zuckerberg had a bad moment. Actually, earlier on today, there was some problems with X. They had problems all over the world, but they seem they have sorted it out. Okay, at this point, guys, please share, put like, subscribe, of course, to all our channels and profiles. And let's start with the show after mentioning the sponsors.
Okay, we have Joanne Oteneru and Aiden Carter, Daniel Estes, and Malgorzata Minta. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for your donation and sponsoring this month.
And
for
thank
buying the
you
book.
for making this book a bestseller, guys. This is, of course, the book of the moment, the book I've been working so much about, and it's having its well-deserved success. I'm gonna actually go and put here on the screen the page on Amazon, so you can go and check it out for yourself. This is a book that you should all have, guys, especially if you follow our work here every week. It's a bestseller. It's a #1 new release in general history of religions. It has all great ratings. You see? Great stuff. Go and purchase this book, guys. It's another way of supporting our broadcast. Bestsellers, #3 in historical essays, #7 in historical history of religion, and #8 in general history of religion. And I want to show you one of the first reviews. I'm going to let Christy read it because I'm very proud of these reviews. If you want to leave a review, I'm always very happy. Of course, if it's a positive one, I'm always more happy. But Christy, here is the review left by Aiden Cat.
Oh, Aiden.
Okay.
And he donated to the show today.
Yes.
So thank you very much, Aiden. We really appreciate it. The book that was never written until now, this book completely surpassed my expectations. Anyone interested in who is running the show behind the scenes needs to read this. The clues were in front of our faces all along. Well done, Leo, for connecting the dots.
And then there is a simple
thank
you from another verified purchase. Wherever you are around the world, in your Amazon of choice, please leave a review. It's always helpful, and I really appreciate honest reviews. And I tell you, this book deserves a good review because I'm sure you are all getting a lot out of it, because I hear many people talking about it. I've been invited on a number of shows. And so on. Of course, it was very timely, the death of the Pope, this new Pope, and
I'm sure your next one will be as well. That's putting pressure.
Well, I'm not gonna.
I know what it is.
No, yeah, but I'm gonna start writing it only this summer when I'm ready for it. At the moment, I'm still promoting this book, and I think it still deserves a lot more. No, don't you think so?
Absolutely. And the other books that needed attention are getting attention now. So
finally,
like Volume 10
and Volume 11,
Volume 9.
History, Secret Societies, and the Politics of the Jesuit New World Order and the Luciferian Court is the last installment of my Confession series. Okay, at this point, guys, let's go into these secrets we have been talking about, because there is actually a connection between this Pope and Aleister Crowley. So here I go with my monologue. Oh, okay. Thank you for the applause. Are you ready, guys? Are you ready? Of course, you know who Aleister Crowley is. You know who this new Pope is. But the question today is all about free will. Because Crowley said, "Do what thou wilt." Should be the whole of the law, but also love is the law, love under will. This is all connected. In any case, the question of why God gave humans a free will often comes up in a discussion about the problem of evil. Someone will ask why there is so much evil in this world. And the answer is that human beings have chosen to do evil things. So God gives us this choice. God is not to blame. If you don't have a choice, then you don't have freedom. So the follow-up question is, God knew all the evil things that people would choose to do. Why would he give us free will? Well, the standard answer seems to be that for love to be real, it must not be coerced.
Correct.
Okay? If we did not have the ability to reject God, then neither we will be given the ability to truly love him from our heart. And this is very important. So some theologians even go as far as to say that human freedom is the highest good and that even God will never violate it. Genuine love, genuine good can only exist in a world where there can be an opportunity for genuine rejection and genuine evil. Otherwise, we will all be robots. Otherwise, there will be no difference between a human and an animal. We have this possibility, and we need to exercise it in the right way. So while will within philosophy is a faculty of the mind, in religion is a concession granted by God. Now, the basic rule of Aleister Crowley's infamous telema and seemingly free will system is, in the words, do what thou wilt should be the whole of the law. And it's stated in his channeled text that he channeled while he was in Egypt in 1904, Liber Alber Legis, or the Book of the Law. In April 1904, in a number of days, he had channeled this transmission of this book that he claimed would be the book of the new aeon, of a new religion that will overtake all the past ones. Now, he picks up, though, on previous concepts, and the concept of do what thou wilt is present also in Rabelais' book, Gargantua and Pantagruel. Very important. This book is a journey which, in a way, it's ironic and satiric, also about the church itself. And, of course, it appears with the French word fa, qu'est-ce voudreux, do what thou wilt, which appears also in this hobby of telema, and the telemites are actually a concept he picks up from there. But in reality, Rabelais himself picked up this concept from a sermon of St. Augustine, where he wrote, love and do what you will. So the phrases love and do what you want are hereby associated with both St. Augustine and Aleister Crowley. And this becomes particularly relevant today because St. Augustine is, of course, connected to the present Pope, who is an Augustinian. Now, St. Augustine was a father of the church, was a Christian theologian who used love in the context of divine love and personal relationships, while Crowley is considered a magician and philosopher, but in reality he was also, aside from a high-ranking member of the Illuminati, also a supreme bishop authority in his Ecclesia Gnostica Cattolica. And even if Crowley seems to interpret it in a different way as a principle of free will and hedonistic pleasure, in reality there is a principle to his madness. And we mustn't forget that St. Augustine, before becoming a Christian, he was actually a Manichaean. And a Manichaean is a follower of money, is a dualist principle follower of a religion which is considered, let's say, Gnostic in a way. And in this link, which I'm going to show you, this is a link from a church which is inside the Vatican. It's the Parrocchio of Sant'Anna, where they do also the UFO events within the Vatican I've talked about in my books. Now, it's very interesting because in this article about St. Augustine, they claim that he was a Manichaean, and at the time, the Manichaeans were a sort of, were a sect that, of course, he had embraced, that they claim it was similar to the P2 Lodge, and it was actually helping him and helped him arrive in Rome. So it's St. Augustine, before becoming, let's say, a Christian and a figure of great importance in the church, had actually embraced a religion which is considered, of course, not heretical because it's not even Christian in nature. It's a completely different kind of faith, which they themselves claim in some way was similar to I mean, not only them, but many others claim is similar to to Freemasonry. So when we are talking about St. Augustine, we are talking about a guy who wasn't always the way he was. And there is some interesting words that needs to be said here, that were said by both Crowley and St. Augustine, because Crowley says, and here Christy can read this, I'm going to put it on the screen for all our viewers. Welcome in the meantime to the Leo Zagami show. Today, of course, is a show that is going to go maybe a bit closer to what we used to do with exploring the Illuminati occult, rather than the news. But I think that this is very important to understand more about these Masonic connections with this Pope, and also the philosophy behind it. So here you have St. Augustine, then Crowley and St. Augustine. So please read.
Okay. Love and do as you will, St. Augustine. Love is the law, love under will, Aleister Crowley. Do what thou wilt shalt be the whole of the law, Aleister Crowley. O Lord, grant me chastity and continence, but not yet.
But not yet. So grant me the chastity and the continence, but not yet. What does it mean, really?
So you don't do it yet, because I don't want this chastity and continence.
Not yet. Not yet.
Don't do it yet.
Don't
make me be good yet.
Not yet. And there is actually a site called The Curious Christian that gives us a very interesting analysis about this whole thing, debacle about the similarities between St. Augustine and Crowley. Please, Christine.
Love and do what thou wilt. It is a saying that I am familiar with from Aleister Crowley, the famous occultist, but it turns out the saying has much more ancient and surprising origin. It comes from St. Augustine, in fact, from his 7th homily on the letter of John. Here's the context. The deeds of men are only discerned by the root of charity. For many things may be done that have a good appearance, and yet proceed not from the root of charity. For thorns also have flowers. Some actions truly seem rough, seem savage, howbeit they are done for the discipline of the bidding of charity. Once for all, then, a short precept is given thee. Love and do what thou wilt. Whether thou hold thy peace, through love hold thy peace. Whether thou cry out, through love cry out. Whether thou correct, through love correct. Whether thou spare, through love do thou spare. Let the root of love be within. Of this root, amore. Can nothing
love means amore.
Amore. This root can nothing spring but what is good.
And this is an analysis that, of course, picks up on the similarity, but also on the differences of love and do what you will, and do what thou wilt should be the whole of the law, and also love is the law, love under will, which are the tenets of Crowley's telema. We are analyzing all this because it's important also to understand that the antecedents of telema were explained in 1926 in a text by Crowley, who fiercely denied that there was, though, a connection. And so he says, it has been remarked by some critics, and this is printed in the Revival of Magic, edited by Imenos Beda, who is the current Grand Master, and the past Sabbatius, who is Kaczynski, who are the contemporary, let's say, contemporary Thelemic personalities, and the Imenos Beda is the grandmaster of the world for the OTO. So they have been involved in the printing and editing of it. It has been remarked by some critics of the law of Telema that the words "do what thou wilt" are not original with the master Therion, or rather with Ivas, who uttered to describe Ankh for Shu, the priest of the princess, the book of the law. So Crowley is putting forward this reply to possible criticism, probably people saying you have copied this, no? So in point 2, he says, this is true enough in its own way. We have firstly the word of St. Augustine, love and do what thou wilt. So he admits that.
So he's a plagiarist.
But then he says, this is, however, as the context shows, by no means what it means in the book of the law. St. Augustine's thesis is that in the heart, the heart be full of love, one cannot go wrong. It is, so to say, a rider upon the theorem of St. Paul, 13th chapter of the first epistle of the Corinthians. This is important, guys. Then he, for more important is the word of Rabelais, fa che scrivo, do what thou wilt. So he goes back to Rabelais. But there is here a understanding, though, of Crowley's interpretation of do what thou wilt that brings us once again closer to St. Augustine, because it is true that Crowley was this hedonistic personality, but creepy Crowley was also a serious and thoughtful religious scholar. So regardless of his evil stand and positioning in God's creation as the self-proclaimed B666, even Crowley stated, if your will is governed by love, by respect for yourself and for the sovereignty of every other individual's will, then it isn't considered in accordance with the law. Often this can be the exact opposite of what we might think as do what we want. But those little idiosyncrasies are for the initiate to understand in Crowley's terms. It is the also important caveat of do what thou wilt that we should clearly differentiate from do what you want. So it's like Crowley says do what thou wilt, or love is the law, love under will, but then explains that by doing certain things you are restricting yourself. Crowley has a sort of puts together a sort of inverted version of Manichaeism. In any case, Crowley is in this will that he's putting forward. It's a little bit like Augustine or Hindu Bhaktis. He's believing that perfect love has the perfect guide to human behavior, and with his perfect contemplation, which I don't know how perfect that is, and his perfect dedication, which I don't know what kind of perfection is that, because he indulged in the most perverse things. But in his concentration or even perfect hedonism, he seems to find a way to realization, to the one. The one is the subject that we also have found in the opening, homily of Pope Leo XIV during his inaugural speech. We are all one, with Christ, he said. Though
he was a charismatic figure. He downgraded Christ, so.
Well, I think that actually he was criticizing, saying that he shouldn't downgrade Christ as a charismatic figure.
That's
I think
not
that
what NBC said. They're liars.
No, I think he should interpret well what he says. I think at the moment, Leo XIV is trying to please as much as possible the conservative side of the Catholic Church, which was neglected by Pope Francis. He's doing it in a number of ways, and he's doing it because, of course, they bring in the money. Now, guys, we know that some of the biggest donors of the church are the American church. It's the American church. And so it's very important what I'm about to show you, because this is a testimony from a Freemason who is writing a letter to Pope Leo XIV to ask him to drop the excommunications and the condemnation that even Pope Francis, who was himself a Freemason, so he was a complete hypocrite, in 2023 against Freemasonry, and he does it in his old-fashioned Masonic podcast. Check this out.
Grab your cocktail and get ready for this episode of the Old Fashioned Masonic Podcast. Welcome to the Old Fashioned Masonic Podcast, where we talk all things Freemasons while drinking an old fashioned. I'm Brian, and it's just a little bit different. We're going to talk about a letter that I drafted and sent to the Pope. Now, some of you knew Bird was a little bonkers, but you're thinking, why in the world, Bird, are you sending a letter to the Pope? You're not even Catholic. You're right, but it's not about me, it's about everyone. So we all know the history that Freemasons are not loved by the Catholic Church. It goes all the way back to the Knights Templar days, and if you fast forward even in 2023, Pope Francis and the Catholic Church, the Vatican, they doubled down. So we hope with the new Pope, Pope Leo the 14th, and being American, that maybe he'll just reconsider. So before we talk about this a little more in depth, let's go over the letter that I mailed to the Pope this week. So here's the letter that I've sent to the Pope, and a lot of you will just read along as I'm going. But for those that are listening to us on any streaming services such as Spotify, Apple iTunes, or others, we'll read this aloud for you. It's drafted to Your Holiness. As you embark on your new chapter, I am deeply concerned with fostering greater understanding and unity. Humbly implore you to consider a matter that weighs heavily on the hearts of many Catholics and Freemasons alike: the prohibition against Catholics joining Freemasonry. I understand the historical complexities that have led to this stance. However, I believe the present time calls for a renewed examination of this issue, particularly considering the realities we observe. It is a well-known fact that throughout history, and indeed in our present day, numerous individuals have held dual membership in both the Catholic Church and Freemasonry. Folks listening to this podcast, we all know Catholic Freemasons, right? These individuals often live lives of faith and service, contributing significantly to their parishes and communities.
So here we have an admission that the Catholic Freemasons contribute often to the parishes and communities, and he will also outline the fact that some of them are the major donors of the dioceses. So this is a very important admission. Please share this video. It's very important that we really understand what is happening here, because Freemasonry seems to have now a new hope with Pope Leo the 14th, and that's why one of them here in America has decided to write this open letter to Pope Leo the 14th.
We are aware of many instances where Catholic Freemasons are major benefactors to various parishes. Their generosity often acknowledged and accepted by their priests, despite the existing prohibition. This creates an environment where participation is known, leadership is aware, yet the forbidden status persists, leading to problems, right? It's a problem. Historically, Daniel Carroll was one of two devout Catholics to sign the United States Constitution. His brother was John Carroll.
Okay, this is very important because I talked about the Carroll family, about John Carroll, about his brother, and also another member of the Carroll family in my book, because not many people know that the first Catholic bishop was a former, between brackets, Jesuit, because it's during the suppression of the Jesuits that America, declares, its independence. And what happens here is also connected to, the Carroll family. It's one of the protagonists in my book. And there is a reason why, because the Carroll family is the one that donates the land where the Capitol building is built. They own Maryland, that was known as Rome. It was Washington who called one of the Carols the richest man at the time in the United States of America. And there were two Carols as founding fathers of this great nation. So it's very important that the people who are following me, if they have this book, they go and read all this, because the suppression of the Jesuit order that took place between 1773 and 1814 gives us the false impression that the Jesuits played only a small role, as I said in my book, volume 12. I'm citing myself here. But in reality, a former Jesuit, John Carroll, became the first American bishop. His brother, Daniel Carroll, was one of the founding fathers, an influential congressman for Maryland, signed two of American fundamental documents, the Articles of Confederation and the United States Constitution. And the Carrolls were direct descendants of the Calverts, a Catholic family who King Charles of England, King Charles I, had granted Maryland as a feudal barony, had this immense land. And then you had also the first cousin, Charles, who had been trained in Jesuit warfare at the Society of Jesus St. Olmsted College, who also played an important role, who was also one of the wealthiest people in America, as it was known back then. I think actually it was I think John Adams, not Washington, who labeled him as such. And he was, we are talking here about the very foundations of the United States of America and the District of Columbia that bore the name Rome in 1663. So what this Mason is saying is very important. Listen to it.
A closing statement there. So obviously I'm not speaking for any Grand Lodge organization, just as a Mason who's not a Catholic, right? We need to, we all know Catholics that are Masons, and we all know big donor Catholics that are Masons. In fact, their priests golf with them, hang out with them, know that.
So, I mean, he's saying, priest, all this is very important.
Carroll, the first Catholic bishop in the United States. Most recently, Mr. Joe Biden recently became a Mason in South Carolina.
This is another thing that I discussed in my book, that Joe Biden became recently a Mason before leaving the presidency. It's very important.
You may not like that one way or the other, but he did. In an era where the need for unity and collaboration across different societal structures is paramount, I respectfully submit that reconsidering the church's stance on Freemasonry could be a positive step forward for both institutions.
So this is a Mason who is writing to Pope Leo XIV, saying all this openly, publicly, and I thought this was a very important testimony for all of you who follow the Leo Zagami show, also in relation to the validity of my book. So please listen carefully to what he's saying.
Freemasonry, with its emphasis on morality, charity, and brotherly loves, shares many values that resonate deeply within Catholic teachings. Allowing Catholics to openly participate could foster greater understanding, dispel misconceptions, and potentially open avenues for collaboration on shared goals and human betterment. I understand that this is a complex issue with a long history. However, I am hopeful that under your wise guidance, a path toward greater reconciliation and understanding can be explored. And then there's a closing statement there.
So let's listen to the closing statement. Under his wise guidance, the Freemason is hoping for Pope Leo XIV to drop the public enmity, which is only public, it's only a show, because in reality you have Masons in the Vatican, you have Pope Freemasons, it's all a charade.
So obviously, I'm not speaking for any Grand
He
Lodge
said he's not
organization,
speaking
just
for
as a
any
Mason, just not a
obedience in
Catholic,
particular
right?
in a Grand Lodge, or
We
he's not
need
particularly, he's not
to.
even Catholic. I think.
We all know Catholics that are Masons. And
He feels sorry for the Masons who are Catholic and who are, in theory, living in great sin.
we all know big donor Catholics that are Masons.
And that is important, I think, when he says big donor Catholics, because, we know how important the big donors were for the election of this Pope, because this Pope is from the United States and is the biggest donor in the Vatican Pence, St. Peter's Pence, as it's known. And that is what really made possible the election of this Pope. And he's bringing into the equation this very cleverly, this Mason, the fact that there is actually the biggest donors are Freemasons, but at the same time they're Catholics.
In fact, their priests golf with them,
And
hang out with them, know that they're Masons, but yet still accept the checks. So we don't want there to be an issue where the priests have to turn a blind eye or Catholics have to feel like they're doing something wrong. So the hope is of the letter, which, listen, it's got like a 3% chance, but it's 3% better than if we did nothing, right? So it's important. Some interesting things that we found out on this, on the research before we put the letter out, is go back to John Carroll, right? The first Roman Catholic bishop.
They always focus on John Carroll, who, by the way, was a Jesuit.
United States that later became the first Archbishop of Baltimore. He played a significant role in establishing the Catholic Church in our newly formed nation. Think about the time. In 1789, he was appointed the Bishop of Baltimore. In 1808, he was the first Archbishop of Baltimore, the founder of Georgetown University. He established St. Mary's Seminary because there was a shortage of priests. So that's why he founded that in 1791. This is interesting. He was an advocate for religious freedom, right? This is important. A strong proponent for religious liberty and worked to ensure that Catholics were seen as loyal American citizens in that predominantly Protestant society at the time.
Well, they were in fact a minority, but in fact in my book I also explain why that's the case. Because by accepting this religious freedom, they still wanted to somehow, following the Jesuit tenets, prepare even the non-Catholics to rule all together. And this has become obviously more and more evident in the last few decades. But has always been present here in the United States, where, guys, you have the elite, which is prepared to the roads in Georgetown, in Fordham, the Clintons, Nancy Pelosi, the husband, everything that surrounds the Jesuits is about power. And in fact, in my book, I finally unveiled the fifth class Jesuit figure, which is something that has not been discussed for the last 150 years, maybe even more. I think the last book that talked about it was published probably in the 1870s or 60s. So we're talking about an absence also of criticism towards the Jesuits, which I've underlined immediately, even in my book. I say that this is a book that it's a rarity. If you think that since the 1980s, only maybe 3 books have been published denouncing the Machiavellic machinations and of the Jesuits.
Because everybody's scared, right?
Everybody's scared. The academic world is scared. The people, of course, who want to criticize maybe the Jesuits don't have the intellectual capacity, the knowledge in theology, history, philosophy, and everything else to come to the right conclusions and put together the dots like I did with this book. Like I said, there was, yes, a former Jesuit, Malachi Martin. There was Saucy with Rulers of Evil in 1999. And last, there was in the year 2000, Eric John Phelps with Vatican Assassins. So we needed to address the fact that most people are scratching the surface because they like to criticize the Club Bilderberg, a creation of the Jesuits. They like to criticize the Club of Rome, a creation of the Jesuits. They like to criticize the World Economic Forum, another creation of the Jesuits. They like to criticize Freemasonry, which has worked hand in hand with the Jesuits, large factions of it, and the Illuminati, same thing. So nobody wants to go at the core of the story. I want to show you something here, which is very important, that I think is going to bring a lot of clarity to a lot of people. In regards to somebody who was, up until a few years ago, a very important figure within the Jesuits, but who was connected also with the founder, the first civil director of the CIA. Yes, guys. Mm-hmm. I want to talk about Avery Dulles. Avery Dulles, this gentleman, which I'm going to show you here, comes from a family which was very powerful. And it's very unusual that a guy like this becomes a Jesuit. And then, out of nowhere, he's also made a cardinal without being even a bishop. But let me explain who this guy is. This guy that came out of Fordham University, that came out as a cardinal, who was a theologian, is the son of John Foster Dulles. John Foster Dulles was an American politician who served as United States Secretary of State under Dwight Eisenhower, and his uncle was Alan Dulles, the director of the Central Intelligence, which I also mention here because he was fixated with Sun Tzu, The Art of War. So he came from a family of people who were not particularly religious, but here he is at the ceremony when he became a Jesuit. And in fact, the uncle was also present at the funeral of the Pope. This is Avery Dulles, ordained in 1956.
At Fordham University Chapel, 36 are ordained as Jesuit priests. Prominent in the procession is Avery R. Dulles, son of the Secretary of State John Foster Dulles, who with Mrs. Dulles is present for the ordination ceremonies.
Dulles, you're right. The pronunciation is Dulles.
I didn't want to say anything.
No, but you're right. It's like the airport in Washington. It's dedicated also. So yes, you're right. It's the pronunciation. Sorry, guys, my pronunciation at times.
Well, I didn't want to say.
No, but you say the right thing. It's important.
800 crowd the chapel to witness the ritual, presided over by Francis Cardinal Spellman, Archbishop of the New York Diocese. After being blessed by his eminence, Avery Dulles, now Father Dulles, who was converted while studying law, bows to the Archbishop before leaving to take up his new vocation. He receives the congratulations of his father, a prominent Protestant church leader, and Cardinal Spellman.
So, Cardinal Spellman, another crook of the crooks. I mean, today, when people arrive in Washington, they arrive in Dallas International Airport.
Been there many times.
Which was dedicated to the father of a Jesuit.
Lovely.
Who himself became also cardinal. I'm sorry for my pronunciation.
Well, get over it.
I know. Yeah, the Dallas dudes. I got it wrong. But guys, the concept is that basically
we knew what you were saying.
The Jesuits have control over everything, and this guy could have become head of the CIA, could have become Secretary of State like his father. He could have become everything. He decided to become a Jesuit, and he did it because, of course, the Jesuits are the ultimate power, and this is evidence of it. No, don't you think so? So. This Freemason that also mentions often the Carol and Carol here and Carol there. And...
I have a Carol question.
Yes.
Lewis Carroll, is he related? Are they related to the Lewis Carroll? You know, the Lewis Carroll? I think he's Alice in Wonderland.
Who knows? Maybe I have. I mean, the thing is that I think Louis Carroll is a pseudonym, though.
It's a pseudonym. Okay.
His name was Charles Ludwig Dodgson. So,
okay, never mind.
and he was from Great Britain, so I think that's a little bit from
I wanted to put a little Alice in Wonderland in it, but I guess I can't.
No. Okay, so welcome to the Leo Zagami show. If you want to help us out, guys, remember purchasing our books. Christy also has made a couple of very interesting books, Confessions of an Illuminati Princess, volume 1 and 2.
No, wait.
Well,
This is not volume. This is 1 and this is 1. They're both 1. I don't have to. I gave it away and I have to buy it.
I thought it was
No, I only have 1.
okay, but because you changed the cover, volume 2, I think.
I know.
Okay,
No,
but
I gave it away.
Okay, you gave them away. But in any case, guys, if you want to eat instead some great food, guys, I mean, sometimes I mean, I get confused because Christy likes to change the covers of books. I change her socks.
No, I did not. I have. Okay, maybe I changed it like a couple times because I couldn't. I always want to try to do better, and so.
But yesterday you made some great sushi, though, Christy.
Yeah, I did.
You
show my sushi.
Yes.
I haven't made it in 3 years. So I was making it in 2022, but then I wanted to have Friday Fun Day Sushi Day again.
Fabulous cookbook, the one I have in my hand.
There's no sushi in it, though.
No, but you can learn instead the pizzas. And today, Christy was astonishing with a couple of great pizzas. She made this pizza with salami, Italian salami. Fantastic.
That was a good pizza.
This was a fantastic pizza. And then there was another pizza that you made today with the carciofi, with the artichoke. Yes, here it is. Let me see it. Here we are. Not bad. So we discussed about the influence of the Jesuits, but let's go back to the connections of Freemasonry with the present Pope, and of course the discussion we were making about the will, because we discussed a little bit this whole situation in concerning the will. Let's remember that the free will is the capacity or ability to choose between different possible courses of action. And now apparently, guys, this is very important because AI is apparently discussing the possibility of having a free will. And what could go wrong if AI has a free will? For many years, I have denounced the concept of cyber Satan. I did it with volume 6.66, with the trilogy, volume 6.66, volume 7, and volume 9. Christy, can you please read what they're saying here? Because this is very interesting.
Okay. Ooh. Philosophers have argued for centuries about whether free will exists. Now a fresh take suggests that artificial intelligence, AI, might meet the conditions for having it. Recent research proposes that generative AI can display goal-directed behavior, demonstrate genuine choices, and retain control over its actions. This intriguing idea comes from Finnish philosopher and psychology researcher Frank Martella, an assistant professor at Aalto University
in Finland.
I guess they didn't see war games, did they?
Well, you see, the capacity of them having free will it is a very important thing that we need here to discuss, because we have been discussing do what the will should be the whole of the law, love is the law, love the will. We have discussed what St.Augustine intended. You see, there is actually scientists like Robert Sapolsky, Sam Harris, that have argued that free will is an illusion. And based on this premise that our actions are determined by factors beyond our conscious control. Of course, this is a concept that goes against everything that we believe, because, God gives us the possibility of choosing between good and evil, but also philosophy and the Freemasons themselves, they will know. A Freemason becomes a Freemason so they can eventually perfectionate themselves. Now they can go through all these degrees. So in theory, the process of levigating the stone, no? But if you are already, predetermined, that will not exist. In fact, the fact that everything is predetermined goes against certain concept. And Christian List, a German philosopher and political scientist who is a professor of philosophy at Freemason and the co-director of the Munich Center of Mathematical Philosophy, seems to have a different idea. He has published a book, it's called Why Free Will is Real. And Christian List states that far from being undetermined by a scientific worldview, the idea of free will is supported by it. And to sketch his argument, he made the following points addressing these properties: intentional goal-directed agency and alternative possibilities among which we can choose, causation of our actions by our mental states, especially by our intentions. So when we talk about even Aleister Crowley, who is irremediably, I consider him a Satanist, it seems though to still address the fact that we have a will. In fact, he considers it fundamental. The term law of Thelema is based on this whole thing. Now, Christy, please read the definition of the basic rule here of Crowley's Thelema.
Okay. Definition: the basic rule of those following the system of Aleister Crowley, do what thou wilt, shall be the whole of the law. This appeared in Liberal
Bellegis,
or the Book of the Law. It has early versions in Rabelais.
Rabelais, with François Rabelais, is the author of Gargantua and Pantagruel,
where it was the French. Go ahead, Maureen. Do what thou wilt, and in a sermon of St.Augustine, where he wrote, love and do what you will. Some people have made the assumption that do what thou will means you are free to do whatever you want. This, however, contradicts Crowley's intent. Here, the term wilt means the will of your higher self, and your higher self is completely in agreement with the will of God. Therefore, the law of Thelema is saying that a follower is called to do the sometimes long and difficult work that will enable him or her to consciously access their higher self, and then only do what is in the nature of the higher self. Thus, their actions will eventually be in harmony with the will of God. There is much older Sanskrit terms, so that which means the path of doing one's will. This is a belief and practice followed by some tantrics. It should be pointed out, however, that karma is also in play. Therefore, a tantric following this path is free to do whatever he or she wills to do, but is responsible for their actions.
So this is how will is in some way discussed and analyzed as a choice always, because I always said from the beginning of the show, this is what really determines a human being rather than an animal, the possibility of having free will, the choice of going either forward or backwards, the fact that of course you have the karmic law means also that if you do something bad, it's going to come back to you. And so if everything instead was predetermined, we will not have that choice.
No.
Now, what is your opinion on all this, Christy?
I think we all should follow God, but a lot of people aren't close enough to God.
Okay, but do you think they have the choice of following God?
Yes, of course.
So you deny
no, but the problem is
what the scientists, these pragmatists are saying, there is no choice. You are actually saying
I have a whole theory, but
let's listen to Christy's theory.
Over a lecture.
Okay.
No, it's
your birthday, by the way, Monday, yeah?
Monday, yeah.
Monday is her birthday.
It's my birthday, and it's exciting.
It's exciting. Okay.
So anyway, I was just gonna say that we're born with, God 100%, as a child,
Mm-hmm.
But through life, you go through so much trauma. And with each trauma that you experience, a demon comes in. And so, it will influence, so with these traumas come demons. So, if you've been molested, it's the worst of trauma is the worst of demons. So like, say you've been molested. that demon is influenced, is around, or at least it stays with you a little bit because that impact of that. And it depends on the person, because if the person is really good, then they take that, and no matter how many people persecute them, they still follow God. No matter how many things go wrong in their life, they say, this is it, I follow God. And that's been my life. I've had people that have bullied me as a child and grew up in trauma, and had this, but I always kept God with me through all the trauma. And so I was always good and I never did anything wrong. But some people, they keep this trauma and they hold it to them and they make it themselves and they become that trauma and then they become that demon. Mm-hmm. And so, that evil thing becomes part of them. So, then you go away from God. And the more, and it's not even some people, sometimes you can lose a family member. Like, for instance, my father committed suicide. Mm. And so, in that moment, I could have turned another way and gone another path. But instead, I decided to take that and channel it into something I could do that was good. So I started painting in that time. And it was a place for me to escape. And I kind of felt like together with God when I was doing that. But then, then I made a wrong choice. When I went to Italy, I made a wrong choice. And I started.
You didn't make the wrong choice to go to Italy. You made the wrong choices once you were in Italy.
Yeah, but that place is evil.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
but of course, I was there, so you decided to stay there.
I had to stay, Amori. I had a force inside of me that was pushing me to believe in you and stay with you. And so that's what I did. But I made some very bad choices. And in every choice I made, I paid for it very badly. And when God curses you, you feel it. And you know it's coming from God. And that's even worse. Well, it feels like terrible. I mean, okay. All right. I mean, it's not, God doesn't curse, but it sure feels like a very bad, it's that you become punished, and you're punished and you're living in your punishment until your punishment is over. And the only one who can tell you the punishment is over is God. So, anyway, some people, they have more things that are in their life that make them further and further away from God. And so they can't make these good choices that people who have God close make. And so, you make a bad choice and everybody has to pay their karma for it. And that's it. So, and then some people blame bad things on God, not on the bad people. Why didn't God stop that? I've heard that a lot from atheists. So
they're like, why didn't God stop? Because he actually was giving you the possibility to choose.
Oh, but wait, I wanted to say, when I went to Italy, I picked up crystals and I started doing.
But this is something you wrote about in your book.
Yeah, in volume 1, I wrote about it. And if you read volume 1, you probably think I'm totally off because I talk about some of the things I was doing. I don't know if I could go back and read that book and see some of the things I was doing, because some of the Christians that were around me, they didn't really criticize me, but they waited for me to get it. And then I had to leave Italy actually to get it because it was so bad over there. It was like the worst of the worst there. But when we came back to America, I started to feel more grounded when I was here in America. And then, God started to come in slowly and help me. And then I realized that God gives you the realization that something's wrong. And so then I was like, oh my God, what was I doing? And then, I got rid of everything. And then now I'm just back to the way I was. And I don't have any problems anymore. I had anxiety. I had OCD. I was always losing my stuff. I mean, I did not have my shit together. Nobody saw me in that 10 years that I was in Italy because I was just quiet. I mean, we've been married for a long time and we've been together for an even longer time, since 2009. So, nobody saw me. They only saw me when I came back to America because I couldn't even show myself over there.
Over there, it was a very difficult time because I was persecuted, arrested, tortured. All kinds of things happened to me. So, I mean, and Christy was my witness.
And then I had to see all of it. But I'm
there were also good moments, but there was also bad moments. Going back to Crowley, he developed a sort of inverted Manichaeism. We said that St. Augustine used to be a Manichaean, and then he gave up apparently Manichaeanism. The nature, for Crowley, he saw it as evil and a fatal force developing within itself. Crowley almost saw the whole thing as suicidal, the will that called Buddha or Christ to their mission. Crowley, primarily known, of course, for his role in the religion of Thelema, drew from a number of sources, Gnostic, occult, and Manichaeism, of course, was one of them. This dualistic religion which emphasized from money, and it used to be a very important religion, a dualistic religion emphasizing the eternal struggle between the light and darkness. Is one such system that Crowley explored and incorporated, of course, and then he didn't maybe identify explicitly as a Manichaean, but he reflected elements of it and also of Gnostic and dualistic thought. He was influenced by the experiences in India that he had, in Sri Lanka, in places which I myself visited when I was a kid, when I was 6 years old. My father brought me to some of these places, and encounters with figures like Franz Hartmann, the great Rosicrucian theosophist, Theodor Reuss, co-founder of the Ordo Templi Orientis and SPY. So Aleister Crowley definitely was an unusual character who took on his role that definitely has influenced a lot the present, let's say, society that we have around us, because of his influence, which I have reported in Volume 8 of my Confessions, in the entertainment world, in the cinema, in the music business, and that, of course, then reflects on the rest of our society, especially from the 1960s onwards, and then helped also by, we go back to Dulles, yeah, who gave birth to MK Ultra, guys, which became also a way of propagating through LSD and so on, all the ideology of Crowley that became immensely popular, especially in the 1960s in particular, and then onwards. Now, going back to Rabelais, of course, in the 5th book of Pantagruel, we have in particular this Ringing Island. This is almost like the hierarchy of the Catholic Church, but we have to always, when Crowley references himself to François Rabelais, we have to always understand that Rabelais himself was actually, in a way, intending the whole thing as a satire. He wasn't necessarily taking it to the extremes of like, because the satirical vein tends to enlarge vulgarity and regularly play with these things. Instead, Crowley took them seriously and put them in place in the Abbey of Thelema in Sicily, pushing him to a level in which Benito Mussolini had to intervene and kick him out of Sicily at one point. But there is an interesting point. Where was the Abbey built? It was in Cefalù. And Cefalù was the place where another important guy comes into our story. That guy is Cardinal Rampolla. Rampolla was the Freemason, an OTO member. We can say, if not strictly OTO, because at the time the OTO didn't really exist. It became OTO after 10 years when Rampolla basically was about to die. He was included in this book. This is the rites of Mizraim and Memphis. It explains how the Egyptian rites then became, in some way, fluctuated. They became what was the OTO, the basis for the OTO, through a guy called John Yarker. Now, I'm telling you all this because it's very important that we talk about this guy. I'm going to show you his face. And he was definitely a very sinister individual in the church. He was about to become Pope, but he will not become Pope thanks to a law, a special law that made an emperor intervened to stop his election. This was Cardinal Rampolla. He was born.
He looks evil.
He was the secretary of Pope Leo XIII. So you see now how it all reconnects?
Yeah.
And he was not any kind of Mason. He was a special kind of Mason who connected to the Egyptian rites, because the Egyptian rites, if you think about it, are practiced by a minority in Freemasonry. They are irregular. They are often practiced in a kind of they are in fact called fringe masonry. He was born in 1843 and he died in 1913. But at that point, the OTO had been established thanks to these patents that came from the Memphis and Mizraim. In particular, Rampolla was born in Sicily, in a town which it's basically in the diocese of Cefalù, in Polizzi Generosa, a town that also gave us a film director like Martin Scorsese. So I mean, we have now Cefalù. Remember, guys, is the place where the Abbey of Telema would be established by Aleister Crowley much later. But Crowley knew about Rampolla because Rampolla was actually included in the publication of the OTO as a guy who was collaborating, was working with them. Now, in the election, the conclave, after the death of Pope Leo XIII, who died on July 20 of 1903, he was the guy who everybody thought he would become Pope. So what happened here? Suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, Cardinal Puccini of Krakow rose from his seat to make a stunning declaration during the conclave with all the cardinals present, and something that nobody had ever heard of. He invoked to stop the election of Cardinal Rampolla, deemed a danger for the church because he was linked with the OTO, basically, milieu, the Egyptian rites of Freemason, and all that. He invoked the ancient privilege of the right of veto by the Austrian Emperor Franz Joseph. At that point, the effect was electrifying because at that time, the emperor had the right to intervene in the conclave. It was almost never used before that right. It was known as jus exclusive, right of exclusion, and it was designed to protect the church from an unworthy candidate. So he was eventually not elected, and at that point, his successor became instead the guy who gave birth to something I talked about briefly here, which is an organization who went against the modernist called Sodalitium Planum. But Cardinal Rampolla, there was actually he was accused of having become a Mason during his time in Madrid, and not any form of Masonry, but a form of Masonry that was very close to all that milieu that they gave birth to the OTO. So the actual Cardinal Rampolla, cited as an initiate of the Catalonian Balearic Grand Lodge headquarters in Barcelona, which, as we see here from a book of the Italian Grand Master Gastone Ventura, was connected to a guy called Villarino Villar. And this group that came under the control of Theodore Royce and the OTO by 1913, the year in which Rampolla then died. So that order of rights of Memphis and Mizraim that Rampolla belonged in 1903, that became after the OTO. So in theory, he was an OTO member. That's why he then appears amongst the saints of Aleister Crowley, and I've cited him at the end of Pope Francis, the last Pope. Here, Cardinal Rampolla with the whole list of the various amongst the members of the OTO. These are the members of the OTO, and Rampolla was suggested as a member, which equiparates to a sort of saint for Aleister Crowley. But this was so. As you can see here, Pope Leo XIV based his name on Leo XIII. Leo XIII wrote two documents, two encyclicals. He waged war against Freemasonry, but in reality, he then had a secretary who was a Freemason, and while he was fighting the Freemasons, the secretary who was a Freemason made the church more modernist. So in the end, when the following Pope came in, he had to establish an organization to go after all these modernists. I show you the Sodalitium Planum. And so what happened, which was a Sodalitium Planum was basically established like another unit of the Vatican intelligence. And it was established because at that point, Pope Leo XIII had waged war against Freemasonry, but Freemasonry was so close to him. Watch, now I'm going to also show you another very interesting thing. Sodalitium Planum, the Fellowship of Pius, Society of Pius, in France was known as laissez-faire, to enforce the prohibition of the modernist heresy declared by Pope Pius X, the successor who got the office instead of Rampolla. Now, it was guided by a guy called Monsignor Umberto Benigni. This guy was very much a traditionalist, like the guy you see in the film Conclave, the traditionalist guy, okay? And when he gave birth to, he was espionage methods, he created basically a whole espionage activity. And one of the people he investigated was the future Pope, Angelo Roncalli, the guy who met the aliens in 1961, who was the first Freemason to become Pope in 1958, and who was connected with the beginning of the Second Vatican Council.
Goodness gracious, they're all wrapped up in
it. So you see, then the Sodalitium Planum was eliminated at one point. It was disbanded in 1921, and then because at that point the church gradually will be taken over, and at that point, after 1958, it was completely taken over. Because Roncalli was a Freemason, he had made even the ritual in the lodge. Then the aliens arrived with the spaceship at Castel Gandolfo. Guys, if you want to know more, remember my books. And it's a lot of stuff. The church was infiltrated, but of course, we could be here talking for hours. I want to thank all the people who have tuned in today. I want to wish my wonderful wife who has edited and published this book happy birthday.
It's not my birthday yet.
Well, but I want to give you in advance.
We're gonna have a date day.
And please share this video with all your friends and family. And of course, we see you next week. Depending on the donations, if we receive an extra donation, we might also be able to come more than once a week. You know how it works. Thank you so much, guys. It's been great to be with you. I think that you have understood also the danger that, unfortunately, this Pope might present himself in a good way, but unfortunately, he has so many skeletons in the closet that sooner or later, he will do things that we probably will not like so much. But we have to always continue to pray and continue to have faith in God, regardless of these corrupt institutions. And I think the people who follow the Leo Zagami show know it better. Isn't that the case, Christy? So we are bringing in the music of Vincenzo Viceversa, which is the author of all my book covers, and we are bringing Vincenzo Viceversa's music with the images of Albert from Telepandemia to end up the show as we usually do with a blast and a dance. And this is going to be also a dance for your birthday, Christy. So it's going to be a special dance. So let's enjoy it together. Yeah!
In that time, our world has taken so many steps in the wrong direction.
Okay, that's I like it.
In the negative utopia, science, technology, social humanization. In the negative utopia, science, technology,
I'm gonna go in my pizza. Directly from Populist.
Bye, everyone.
Take care. Happy birthday.
technology, social organization, dehumanization.
But this is the reality of today's world. Don't forget to tune in next week and put like. Technology, social organization.